Okay, for people who are joining this live stream, we are talking about food in Wolfram Alpha and Wolfram Language. And let's see, it's been a while since I've seen what we're doing here. Big project, and what should I be doing? So
basically, like over the last years, we have revamped the whole food, and in the language, we have it available since how much? Half a year plus, and this is now the new Wolfram Alpha website, the new pods and everything based on vastly bigger data set.
How much bigger is the data set?
I believe the previous version had about 12,000 foods, and we have about 150,000 foods almost now. Okay.
And for example, if I'm so can I do this? Where am I going? Under current, or what should I do?
So there are links to current as well, but if you intend to test it on current,
can I just go to current on a web browser? Or
you can, but I think it's probably easier to use the links in the notebook. Further down, once we've talked about some of the changes, there are some hyperlinks that you can click on that will take you to current.
Okay, but I mean, if I want to go just check out some new foods and things, can I do that on? If I just go to current, can I
Yes. Yeah, you can, but you'll need the prefix al mode.
Okay.
That's because it's only in the Wolfram language at the moment and is not exposed to.
So if I say, for example, orange drost chocolate, will I be in luck or will I not be in luck here? Not looking promising. Okay. So would you have expected, okay, that's cool that we have that. Okay, but there are going to be new pods here. Are these the old pods or are these new pods?
Yeah, that looks like it did not parse correctly in the new stuff, and so it used the old existing one.
Okay, so what would I do to make it
I think we may not have that in the new stuff yet, or at least not the complete linguistics for it.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Perhaps a different, but would be better to.
Okay. Fine. So let's actually look through here. Okay. Example foods.
This is what you wanted on changes since the last time. So that's the first section.
Okay.
So the example foods are split into generic and brand.
Oh, so wait a minute. This just went, okay. So if I say owl mode and I get a picture of an owl, saltines. Oh gosh. Well, that's bad parse, as you can see, right?
There are a few issues with the parsing, particularly since we haven't fully switched over to the new system, which we won't.
But that parse, but obviously anything that is in fact a food that's in word data should be picked up here.
Right.
So, well, there's several issues here that I can see immediately. I mean, so first of all, that is really ugly. I mean, the fonts are bad, the size is wrong, etc. Right?
Yes, that's a recent change that we've done because it doesn't scale well if we use the current settings on larger screens, like say on a tablet or with magnification.
Well, this isn't going to work, so you need to find something that will work.
Sure.
Right. And I don't know whether this thing is an image or whether it's Michael, have you been involved in this? I mean, this isn't.
We discussed it a lot, yeah.
This doesn't follow the standard for what a nutrition label should look like, and it should. Right, and if you need vector graphics for that, then we should be putting vector graphics there. I don't know exactly how to do that, whether it's an SVG or what it is. Make sense?
Yes, we will fix it.
And also, I thought we were going to have an in-language way of getting nutrition labels. We already do, don't we?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
most of the things work in language.
Okay, all right. So I should stop trying to do it on the website, is what you're saying?
No, we want
No.
Okay, but let's take a look here. Okay, so first of all, cracker, variety saltine. Okay. Example foods. That's a very weird thing to say.
But we have
foods. What's that?
But we have basically thousands, or not thousands, but dozens of food that fall under this. So these are some examples of them.
No, I understand that. I think that that title doesn't seem like the best. Let's think about this. Interpretation. We're hearing typing if we can.
Food instances.
Yeah, I mean, specific instances. That sounds a bit technical. Look, instances isn't terrible. I mean, this is really what you're really saying is this is a subcase of the input interpretation, which is something we haven't really seen very often before. That is, for example, let's say we have a car and it has many, many, many sub things. The fact is, it's still called a car, that particular kind of car. Whereas here, okay, another point about the branded ones, it's sort of unfortunate that, Ahold is kind of winning the lexicographic war, so to speak.
Yes.
And it's always going to win it.
Then we can sort by string lengths.
That's an interesting idea. What about the capitalization stuff? Do you have decent coverage of that? I mean, look, if you were able to sort by web frequency or something, that would be the best and coolest thing, I would say.
It will be tough.
Because?
It will be tough because these names come from the branded USDA food database, whatever they use, but other providers or other supermarkets might use a different word order for the same product.
So we didn't intend to normalize the titles. We kept them as they come from the provider.
And why is like Keebler all caps? Is that because that's the way that brand works?
This is how it was provided. How they
by USDA.
Okay. By the way, the number of times I had to press more was crazy. Whatever it was doing there, its mooring was needed to be fixed. Make sense?
Yeah, we can get more at once.
I don't understand. Do you mean it was too slow, or
no? I mean that I had to press more 3 times in order to get. This should have been a single more to get this amount of additional stuff, probably, or perhaps 2 mores. But in fact, it was like 4 or 5 mores.
Okay.
It was just putting 2 more at a time. Yeah, it should be doubling every time, roughly.
Okay.
Until we time out.
What's that?
Until we potentially time out, because for some things we have many.
Okay, if we did string length, Ahold saltine crackers wheat would win.
Yes.
Do we know separately the brands, which brand it is?
Yes, we should.
Then why not put this as something where there's a brand header I mean, I don't know what premium, is that a brand? What I'm thinking about is to have essentially a brand header and then have those things not necessarily stacked like this. Maybe that's crazy.
We're showing 1 per brand?
What's that?
We're showing 1 per brand?
Maybe, at least to show a little bit more, diversity of what's going on. Like, who has one of these things? Okay, you can get it from Nabisco, or you can get it from wherever. Just because that's a useful piece of information, a useful piece of immediate information. Oh, there's a Nabisco version of this. Making sense? I mean, yeah, in fact, knowing which brands support this particular food type seems useful to me. Actually, more useful.
But then, like, if this is useful, it seems more sensible to have your own pot, like brands that make this.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
I mean, or we could just have something where this becomes branded and it's a list of brands and there's a button that says show the specifics.
I feel like this is wrong because we want first you want, like you ask for a food, and now we tell you a lot about brands.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I agree that it needs to be not, front and center there. What is selected from 18 foods mean?
No, if you click on the nutrition facts on the button there, you will see that we have the ranges as you requested.
Show ranges, right?
Oh, show ranges.
So that's informative but non-standard.
It's nice. It's nice. It's really quite nice. I wish we could have it be the default, because it's actually much more, if you really want to know what you're eating, it's much better to be able to see that range than to just say, oh, it's 11 grams. Oh, it actually might be 70 grams. See what I'm saying?
Then we call it something like, we preface the word nutrition facts with something that make sure that's not the standard one, and show both by default would be one possibility.
I think that's a serious possibility. Honestly, this seems really useful to me. I mean, I don't know what people who are more food oriented think, but it seems like really useful to me to know, okay, the carbs for this are going, it doesn't really matter which brand I have, the carbs are always going to be about the same. Am I making sense? Whereas the sodium is way different.
No, I like it, but it might not be everybody's interest.
Okay, is it okay? So I think we should show both of them. Is there any possibility? Could we show them next to each other?
I don't think so. We have, I think, already now this on the smaller ones maxes out the space.
Okay, fine.
They could be just in the same pod, but different subpods. One could be
I understand.
Traditional and then ranged.
The other possibility would be, this stuff down here is probably less important. I mean, people are going to make, look, I suspect, what do I know about this stuff? I mean, sodium and carbs, people pay attention to, I think.
Yes, that's why they are there.
Well, I know that's why they're in the label. I'm saying that we could have a secondary label which by default doesn't show the whole thing.
To save the 4 lines at the bottom.
That's a waste of time.
I think so too. That's.
The thing that bothers me is that the average nutrition label is cute but fake. In a sense, we don't know how to do the average. What does average mean? Across a measure based on grocery stores or something. You know what I'm saying?
I think it means, I think if I correctly remember, Andrew, correct me, it means what the USDA determines based on their sample size plus 20% or 15% measurement error.
You mean,
really? Based on, so they bought saltine crackers based on, this is, so wait a minute. So did they buy an equal number of Nabisco and Keebler saltine crackers, or did they buy them in ratio that people buy them in actual supermarkets?
No, definitely not. I'm pretty sure not. I don't think it is so detailed. I mean, when you go to the USDA food database, by default, they only show you the numbers, but you can get means and standard deviations and these things.
Okay, but we need to know
how many, but I doubt it is weighted by.
Okay, let's figure that out. And let's find out how real the average is. I think that's going to determine what we really want to do with this.
So
I find this very questionable, because for an individual, it does not matter what people consume.
What do you mean? What?
Okay, like you wanted to weigh the weighting you wanted according to how many of them are actually sold. Modulo the problem of getting.
Well, I understand that's kind of stupid because your actual neighborhood grocery store might only sell Nabisco.
Exactly, this is my point. So I feel like uniform sampling is better
It's not,
than
yeah, okay.
a sampling based on usage.
No, Michael, because the chance that you're right, if only one store in the country sells premium saltine crackers, right, then the probability of you, I mean, it's a weird calculus here. I mean, the probability of you being right is much higher if it's weighted by, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I think it will be unrealistic to get the distribution.
Well, that may be true, but the question of what one should do, yeah. Well, I understand. Let's loop back to this. I want to see a bunch more stuff. I really like this ranges thing, though. And George on our live stream is also supporting me that he thinks the range is good too. So I agree.
The people are more used to not the ranges.
I'm aware. So both have a value.
Okay.
And the only question is whether we want to use the real estate to show them both.
No, it's probably too much. Because you want to show the pictures. You do not just want to show the nutrition labels.
I would disagree with this one because I feel like the pictures have basically zero informational value.
Yeah, the pictures are entertaining, and they mostly are, did I buy the right thing? Is this, no, not did I buy the right thing? Is this talking about the thing that I'm holding in my hand? I mean, honestly, they're more in the input interpretation area, in a sense. Okay, but let's talk about the images thing. Selected from 18 foods. What on earth does that mean?
There are 18 foods that matched and have images, I believe is what that means.
Okay, but then I think what we want to say is whatever this is instances up here. And then I think what we should say is sample images here. And then just a ... paren 18 total. And then with a more button. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And this is not, oh yeah, it does say. It would be nice if this font could be smaller here. Those labels. They're very, it's like, that's just reminding you. I mean, really, okay. Also, does the picture, what happens to the picture? Oh, cool. Magnificent. Okay. Feature space plots. What the heck is this?
That was your suggestion.
Well, it looks very interesting, but what is it?
You use all the properties and run feature space plots over them.
No, I understand, but what's the category of thing that's in the feature space plot?
That's actually a good question. That's what I wanted. That's one of the questions I put in the notebook. That's one thing I noticed in preparing for all this stuff is that it's really cool and looks neat. But yes, it needs to probably say.
Well, like where is saltines in this whole thing?
Right. So normally, if the way this works is that those foods that had enough data to make it into the plot are shown in there. So that's all crackers. If saltine crackers wound up in this plot, they're highlighted in red. They didn't seem to make it in this one, so saltine crackers must not have enough information to have made it for the data that I had to set up with. But if you look in the notebook, there are some examples there where the dots are actually lit up in red for the ones that match.
Okay.
So basically it's a little bit zooming out. It's not kind of which of these crackers should I buy, but
yeah,
what other things are.
I mean, it's pretty interesting that basically it's saying that this is an outlier. Whatever this is, whole wheat crackers are an outlier from all these other ones. This needs more work to figure out both the labeling and I mean, by the way, that size of labeling could really be used here, I think, without harm.
Sure.
Notable features. That's a very weird part of speech for what is that what we did before, or have we not had this one before? Based on the common food type. This is very awkward English, if I might say so. Have we had a pod like this before?
No. is new.
Okay, so what this really is saltine crackers are a good source of manganese. That's what you're basically saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not so interesting. Most people are interested in iron or folic acid or something like that.
I'm aware. I mean, but if you know, I have never heard of anybody who says I have a manganese.
No, exactly. It's a little bit weird, yeah.
Well, why not? I mean, maybe people have manganese deficiencies and they don't know it, and that's what causes some terrible disease lots of people have. Who knows? Okay, in any case, is it the case that when you say notable features, what other possible notable features are there? Are they all good source of, or are they something different?
I think they're all variations on good source, high source. I think
Okay.
that the
Well,
point
so
of
let's look at what that is, because then what I think is that we want to say something that we want to have the pod title be something like, you know, more like the good source of, although that's not quite the English construction we use. And then
nutritional benefits.
yeah, it's okay. I mean, something that's better. That's better part of speech.
But the good source was a technical term, yeah, Andrew.
Yes, USDA, I believe, FDA rather, defines when the ranges for something to be considered a good source, a great source,
So we cannot change
high
this
source.
rating.
Okay, fine. But then let's just say, look, good source of nutrients doesn't work, right? I mean, better would be to have notable features, don't box it, have this just say good source of, colon, you know, in slight gray, colon, manganese, you know, great source of, colon, you know, molybdenum or something. Am I making sense?
Fine.
I suppose another option might be to lump in dietary restrictions once that is prepared. We could put that as a notable feature as well.
What would be an example of one of those?
Like gluten-free, vegan, vegetarian.
Yes, that would be interesting. I agree. That's a possible thing to put in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
That plot is too big. See, yeah, right. I mean, it should just be half the size because it just doesn't have that much information content. Nice plot. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, literally just half the size because it's going to work fine at half the size, isn't it? There's never, for nothing, is it? This is the level of detail that any of these are going to get, right? Maybe even less than half the size.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm suggesting take that and
180 times 180.
Honestly, we'd be fine at that size because all you're getting is the shape, and you're saying, does it point at carbs? I mean, obviously the carbs, protein, etc. That the sizes of those are roughly right. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think it's fine at that kind of size.
So 140.
That was actually smaller. That was 120 something. You know, you'll have to thicken up some pieces and things, but I think that's the right thing. That's interesting. Okay. Energy content. There's a lot of new stuff here. It's great. Okay, highest daily recommended values. Okay, I understand what you're trying to say. I think it's poorly said. You're saying these are the things of which this food gives, and by the way, I don't even know whether it's the average here. What happened here? What happened here with your averaging? Why isn't there a picture like that? In other words, when we've got this ranging stuff going on up above, why isn't this ranged as well?
I think it's too complicated.
Well, what about the possibility of opacity? Look, what you're showing here, I don't think that's hopeless. What you're showing here is, I mean, look, there are values here. Imagine that you could have opacity showing the range. Imagine that what you had was the outer boundary. I mean, what you're going to get is two different things I guess they can cross over. No, they cannot cross over because they're both bounded ranges, right? So you've got two polytopes, one inside the other.
No,
I don't see why that.
No, there's no reason that they will cross over.
No, you have in and outer one.
If one,
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. That it could be the case that, but I mean, the only thing that's meaningful here is the values on the coordinate directions, right?
yes, correct.
So isn't every coordinate direction like the protein is blah to blah, right?
Okay, this depends if one sees it. If one sees it for each min-max or if one sees for each concrete food.
Exactly.
If each concrete food has a polytope, then the polytope will be overlapping.
Exactly. Both are interesting, it seems to me. I think the default should be the min-max of each side. But then it will be cool if we can do it to be able to plot the thing for all foods superimposed somehow.
I think for the normal person it's overkill, but we can try it.
Try it. I mean, this is great data. George on our live stream is pointing out that in Europe, these things are measured in joules. I assume we localize.
I believe so, yes.
Let's just for the hell of it, let's check.
If we don't, we certainly can put that in.
Oh, what do we want to say? We want to say Elmo plus IP equals dot FR, for example. We don't. We should.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be fixed.
Check which countries it's in. Thank you, George. Okay, let's go to this one now. This naming is just utterly confusing. Also, the bars are too thick in my view. The bars just need, I mean, you don't need a great big, you know, tall yellow bar. You could just do with a straight, you know, a straight just line out there, pretty much. Am I making sense?
Okay.
By the way, it'd be great not to hear your mouse wheel, sir. Okay. So I would say this should say something like top components, ingredients, constituents. What is it? Top. What are these things called? Components? What are they called? What is selenium is a blah of a cracker.
A nutrient. These are nutrients.
Okay. Whew, that's hard to say then.
It's also important to note that these are only the nutrients that have daily values, daily recommended values defined.
Right.
So there could be some that wouldn't even show up. So
right. This is so incomprehensible. I mean, if maybe top would be better than highest. Top daily recommended values.
What about highest in? Will this clarify?
What would be the full form?
Highest
by
in daily recommended values.
No, it's incomprehensible.
Okay.
How about daily recommended values highest for this food? That's stupid too. Oh, gosh, I don't know. All right, let's come back to
largest fraction of daily recommended values.
No. What does that mean? That's a fraction of daily, but that's largest. What does the largest qualify?
The
There.
fraction.
I understand, but it's not obvious it qualifies the fraction. It could qualify the
Value.
yes.
Yeah, that's correct. Then we add parents.
What?
No, it was a joke. We could have an open parent and a closed parent to make sure who is qualified.
Okay, let's think. If we had multiple foods, what would this pod look like? Does it have comparison in it?
At the moment, I do not believe so. I think this only happens for single entities.
Might be interesting that to have bars out of both for both foods sorted by the highest in either food, if you understand what I'm saying. And then you can compare, like one of them is, in other words, if you get what I'm saying by sorted highest in either food, and then I can see how you wound up saying highest daily recommended values. It is, however, incomprehensible when you first see it. See, the problem is when you say energy content, it's clear that's energy content of the food. Here, their daily recommended values.
Percentage of daily recommended value? It's obvious that it's ranked by magnitude.
Yeah. Well, particularly if we put a ... at the bottom.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, what about saying something like highest nutrient density values? Because I think that's essentially, it's measuring the amount of nutrients per serving. And so if you have more of a particular nutrient per a certain amount of food, whether it's a weight or a volume, then it's higher in nutrient density. So I think that's essentially what this is saying, is that, it's dense in these nutrients.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, that's nice because it explains what's going on, particularly if it's correct. Well, so what you're suggesting is highest densities. Highest.
I think people will think on physical density, not density in the sense of fraction.
All right, I don't know a solution for this yet. We have to come back to it. I don't know. What the heck is approximate?
So approximates is a term that's used to describe the basic nutrients that people typically care about, the big ones that are on the label. So the ones you see there, carbs, fats, protein, and so on. Those are called approximates.
We can't use that term. No amateur person is going to know what that means. I would say basic nutrient information, and then
We could call them macronutrients.
if that's correct, that would be fine. Except water isn't a nutrient, last I knew. And why is this timing out? That's amusing. I would have thought that we wanted to. How are we sorting those particular activities?
I'm not sure at the moment, but we can rearrange it if needed.
Well, I mean, they just seem totally random. What about walking? What about running? What about, why are we picking these particular ones? Am I making sense?
Yes.
partially because we didn't want to overemphasize this.
Well, I know, but I mean, these particular collections seem really random to me. And aren't they ranked by, I mean, if I understand it, calories, bicycling, swimming, whatever, you burn calories at a certain rate. It's not like it matters whether the calories come from cabbage or chocolate. Correct?
Yes.
So to me, I mean, what you're showing here, boy. I mean, this is a really weird list, if I might say so. I mean, walking isn't among them, for example.
To be honest with you, where this data comes from is rather oddly specific. There are some things like I think the bicycling one is like technically taken from data for bicycling to work. There are some that are like sitting on a couch and things like that.
Yeah, fine, I know that, right? But there's also just walking.
Yeah,
and I mean, also this is kind of crazy. 6.4 minutes. Okay, well, it depends on whether I do. Does anybody even say calisthenics anymore? I thought there was a 1960s word.
You have the data for it.
What's that?
You have the data, so we're using it. Yeah, we do changes. We will review that and we improve that.
Okay, but seriously, 6.4 minutes is too much precision.
Yes,
I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think one digit is really all you're going to get from these things. Well, I mean, these 13 is, okay, I admit this is sort of 1.5 digits. But, 194 is really, really specific. Like, it's like I just got myself a Bluetooth connected toothbrush, which records precisely that I should spend 2 minutes brushing my teeth. And
do you know which tooth you touched along?
No, it knows the pressure. There is some technology that gives you that, but I don't think it's really ready for prime time. We've talked to a number of companies that have various in-mouth camera thingies, but yeah, I mean, I don't think it even knows. It could have accelerometers that know which way up it is and things, but I don't think it knows that.
Couldn't it not just have, if you have your Bluetooth set on the ear, measure distances?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting idea. I don't think you need. I mean, look, it can also measure whether the toothbrush is, what the orientation of the toothbrush is, right? Which, like,
that helps.
Yeah, which would certainly give some information, and it should be able to measure. I mean, it should be able to measure from accelerometer data. Anyway, never mind. We're not doing connected toothbrushes right now. We're okay. Let's go back. Go ahead.
A lot more content to go through. If you just
I know. So don't get me distracted talking about connected toothbrushes. Okay. What is this food type image?
So this says, say you want an apple, you don't want to see pictures of apple chips or something. It always shows an image of an apple.
That was one thing we discussed in our previous meeting, is that if you punch in apple and you find like the images below where it only shows slices, you may want to know what an actual apple looks like. And that's what this image, that pod serves.
So wait a minute. If what I specified here is applesauce or something, am I still going to see an apple here, or is it just really going to just be applesauce?
Well, you'll get both, right? Because the images pod will show you the specific ones that match your query, and then the food type one will still show up to remind you what an apple looks like. For example, if
okay, so
food type is basically one level up.
Okay, but by food type you mean the thing from which this was derived by squashing, baking, slicing, whatever else.
Yes,
more or less, yes.
There are really much fewer food types than foods.
Right, but I mean, really, it's what the content of what went in the raw material for these things.
Or generic material, like 100 grams of cheese. You don't want to see Roquefort or Gouda. It's all cheese.
Well, you don't want to see packaged cheeses, is what you're saying. You're showing this is, food type is really a weird thing for me, for that name, for, given that it's the apple, which is going to be turned into a lot of prepackaged foods.
You can take generic and call it generic.
Well, really, isn't it food content, food content image? I don't know. That's not quite right either.
That might not always be correct, yes.
Well, let's find out what some of the other examples are. By the way, George on the live stream is agreeing with me that these things can't really be stated to more than a digit.
Yeah.
of precision.
There's only George on the live stream.
I don't know, but George has been active and we appreciate his comments. Okay, so I'm not happy with this, but I don't know what to do with it exactly. I mean, I think it's confusing when you ask for applesauce and you get a picture of an apple. I mean, that's kind of stupid because we all know what an apple looks like. If you asked for, I don't know, what would be an example where this is really useful?
Unusual tropical fruits. A lot of people don't know what a durian looks like.
What looks like?
Durian. It's a notorious fruit that's common in Southeast Asia that's illegal to eat in the public in Singapore because it's so smelly. It smells like rotten flesh and it attracts flies.
Oh, I've heard of this. How is it spelled?
D-U-R-I-A-N.
Okay, so I go to food type here. So I don't understand any of this. What the heck is results here? That doesn't make any sense.
If only one.
No, but what does result mean?
Yes, we have to change that.
I think that's. I think a pod may have timed out or something. I think normally it replaces it with a different result there with the example foods thing.
Okay, fine. So that would be instances or instance, but that's pretty weird when there's only one of it. Specific instances. Well, okay, so maybe what it wants to say is something like specific instances, and this would be the singular specific instance. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here, if there's only one of it, again, we just say image, presumably. Or maybe not. I don't know in this case.
So one example where the image may be useful is if you qualify a food, for example, a red delicious apple or maybe a Granny Smith apple, for example.
Yeah,
and if we have images for lots of those, you expect to see a green one. But if it may be nice to know what a generic apple looks like, and that's when you would get also an image of a specific apple. Or in the case of like the screenshot on the left there, if you looked up apple slices, for example, you would get pictures of the products for apple slices, but you may also want to know what an apple looks like. That's really, I think, the goal of that pod.
Yes, I agree. I understand. I mean, I think there are many corner cases that we're seeing in this thing on the right that are not being well handled with the current. What on earth is this? Oh, that's interesting. That was a pod we didn't see in the other case.
Yes, I think so.
Because we know this is a category of thing. No, but we would have known in the other case it was a category of thing of crackers.
Right, but crackers don't exactly fit into the categories that we have good data on to create that pod.
I see. So in other words, this is some kind of fairly complete collection of fruits. Is that the idea?
Yes, so the fruits correspond to one of the 5 basic food groups that I believe the USDA defines in my plate.
Okay. And again, there's this issue of measures, so to speak. It's one fruit for itself, so to speak. You know, one fruit, one unit type thing.
I think that pod makes a little more sense if you look in the notebook. If we'll scroll down a little bit, you'll see more examples of what it's typically looks like in more cases where there's more data.
Let's take a look here. Anyway,
sure.
So.
And there's also that feature space plot too, where you could see where it's lit up in red.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so look, in terms of labeling here, having some labeling for the outliers will be very useful if we can arrange that. I mean,
That's not really under control.
Yeah, when there are hundreds of points, it gets very difficult to have labeling.
why don't you ask between Brett and
Yeah.
Etienne and so on, ask them what can be done. I mean,
Okay.
show them these examples, because
Yeah.
what do you learn from this? Okay, what you really learn is, what are you trying to learn? What you're trying to learn is what matters and what doesn't, right? So, for instance, whatever's out in this corner, okay, apples dried, sulfured, uncooled, that's fairly far away. Gala apples is similarly far away.
Andrew and I looked at quite a few of them, and there are some cases where you really learn something, like you have some ground beef and you see the various amounts of fat. But there are also examples where it's like reading tea leaves to make sense out of it.
Okay, well then let's try to understand what we can do with that.
One other thing to point out is that we've done some more changes. Right now, the feature space plots that you're seeing now are based only on the approximates, or those basic nutrients that we talked about. Michael and I have a better scheme that we've put in, but it's not quite done yet to produce slightly better ones as far as the clustering goes,
Okay.
give much better results.
See, that's interesting there, that two different forms of white potatoes sort of have yellow potatoes in the middle, so to speak. In other words, what this is trying to give one is some sense of, what matters, how clustered the stuff is, seems to me. Which, if we can give people that, it seems really quite useful. Okay.
This is the example I was talking about, where you can see the food that you queried for compared to other foods in the same class. So in this case, dairy products.
So why is particular fruit visible here? I don't understand.
Yeah, I think it should be. I think there's a small bug where when you find just one, it's not showing up on the plot
So
there.
it should be a dot or a vertical bar or something.
Yes, I agree. I think I just don't have that case handled very well.
Okay, so
if you scroll a little further down in the notebook, you'll see.
It would help me if this said all dairy here, cream cheese and all dairy.
Sure, that can be done.
I mean, this is interesting. No question, this is interesting. It's very nice, actually. Gives one a very good sense of where the thing lies. Graphically, I think it doesn't need to be as tall as this. You could scrunch it up a bit.
Sure.
Yeah, I think putting the word all would be useful here in front. Michael, do you have a comment on that?
Maybe, I'm not sure.
I think it's just really confusing.
Okay.
Because one of them is a specific and one of them is,
We discussed it, we thought kind of the color difference makes it clear.
I think I agree. Having all on there would make it a little more clear that we're talking about all dairy items as a group rather than just dairy. I think you're right. That's a little misleading.
Yeah.
Incomplete.
Okay. What about all after dairy in parents?
Possible. That's fine too. I mean, I would say all could be in gray before it would be also fine. On the live stream being asked also by George, it would be useful to have all this inside Wolfram Language, especially the feature space plot. It is, right? I can get the feature space plot, can't I?
Yes, the feature space plots are available at the food type level. The highlighting and stuff is much trickier.
How would I do it?
You could just do entity value for entity of.
So I have to set some weird thing here to go to the right place.
No, it should be on production as well.
Okay. Okay. Entity value of
entity food type.
Of entity food type.
Yes, sorry. The entity is a food type. Maybe say apple.
I could have just done that with.
Oh, sorry. I have a tendency of writing it out as entity value. And then the property would be feature space plot.
But can I get the imp mask? That's cool. And it was quite nice and zippy too. We should talk about what the actual exposed properties should be. Right, because this is very pre-digested. I mean, it's useful to have the pre-digested thing, but we also want the input to this, which is presumably what is the input? The input to this is presumably a bunch of vectors with tagging.
Yes, I know, but I feel like that's a medium input. Then the real input, I feel like, is a feature space plot of, and then comes a list of entities and properties. You know, what you described is kind of a medium evaluation.
Sorry, say that again.
Like what you just described is like half of the work is done, but not all. Then I feel like the input would be feature space plot, open, close, entity value, list of foods, comma, list of properties.
Yes, possibly. Possibly, yes. Although one could say here something like
we could have a qualifier that gives you this version.
Possibly. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's useful to have the raw material for machine learning stuff.
I think Michael and I have discussed some things that we might be able to make available that way, like a special property that gives you the properties that were involved and the entities and things like that. But I don't think.
Right. I mean, so what I would imagine is something like the following: that there's essentially a data set here for this food type that contains the core. You're calling them proximates, for example, what it looks like is, you know, lucky leaf red spiced apple rings, whatever it is, lucky leaf, whatever that entity is, the lucky leaf entity, whatever. Blah 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 blah. Arrow, and then here would be, you know, sodium arrow blah. In other words, something which is a vector of useful stuff that you could then go and process.
Yeah, we could expose that.
I think that would be helpful. Okay. These are interesting. It's very interesting. Very interesting, really. Yeah, great. Okay. Okay. Boy, there's a lot to go over here, isn't there? So this is entity property, as you say. What is relative calorie content?
That's the most common query type we get.
Yeah, I understand. But what is the...
So in the entity value...
By the way, why is that bean singular? I mean, it sounds like it's just one bean.
That is the food type there, but you're right. That probably should be switched to beans. That's one of those cases that we can switch over. Okay. There are a few cases where foods, you will say them in plural, despite normally wanting to put the singular in there.
Right.
Yeah, that can be fixed.
Okay, but now when we say beans preparation refried, I mean, how that ontological structure, so to speak, I mean, clearly in the everyday, version of this, we'd say refried beans. But we're thinking it's useful. I mean, what does it look like when it gets more complicated?
You mean what the input interpretation looks like when it's
Yes.
more complicated?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe we've had meetings in the past about what the input interpretation should look like, and I think there's another example below this
Okay.
for, I think, a fried chicken leg, for example, and that I think shows a little more of the detail.
How can it be a whole chicken if this is the leg of the chicken?
So chicken legs are sort of countable in a sense, right? They're a whole item rather than being a partial one, and so the reason why one item is being used there and with the whole is that it's different. So, like sliced apples, for example, would not be included, and that's why if you said one apple, for example, then the slices would be excluded from the query. That's the mechanism that's doing that here.
Okay, but wait a minute. The thing I'm objecting to is it's not the whole chicken. It's just the leg of the chicken.
Right, and that's what the part is for.
Okay.
It's trying to refer to a whole leg.
I would just say maybe the whole should be moved more to the right.
Yes, I think so too.
Oh, that was completely confusing. I thought it was the whole chicken.
That's why I'm trying to clarify.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right. Moving the whole to a different spot when there are parts involved is definitely something we should do.
Right. I mean, leg paren whole is probably what you would want to say.
Yes, exactly.
This is pretty confusing. I mean, this is very computeristic. You know, chicken, amount one item, part leg, preparation fried.
The last time we had it more Tapia, he didn't like it. Because it became pretty big.
I understand. But this is very computeristic. And the fact that it's, you know, it will be better. It's just very, look, it's a fried chicken leg. Okay. But somehow here we're, taking this apart. And I don't think this is working. So we should remind ourselves what the stacked version looked like. And it may be better if we're going to have to make it this computeristic. It may be better to give to admit that we're being computeristic and stack it.
But last time you didn't like this at all, the stacked version.
I know.
Okay.
But now that I'm seeing this, I don't like this either. So maybe we need a different idea.
We tried to be more verbose, but you didn't like that either. So you said should be more like this.
Let's get a bigger collection of examples and let's look at this again. Okay, let's look at a bigger set of examples, and let's, for each of those examples, if you've got 3 ways to present them, let's present them in all 3 ways and let's compare. Okay, this is complicated, and this is not going to work. People are not going to understand this. And I don't even know what absolute iron content means. I mean, it's like, what is the difference in relative calorie content, where I ask for calories, and absolute iron content? What am I being told here?
So the difference is in the 2 types of properties that we have in entity value. So through entity value exposure, the relative ones refer to on a per gram basis, and that way you can sort of compare them all together. So these are towards the top of your notebook, you can see right now, those are all in calories per gram.
You say something like how many calories are in broccoli or how many vitamin A.
I see. So this is because we didn't say how many. I see. That's the right thing here. This is. Yeah. All right. It's a little confusing. They're saying relative there. I mean, I would. I mean, I see. If it was an absolute, it would be for 1 serving of refried beans. Is that correct?
Or a specific quantity, yes.
No, I understand. But I think this is confusing because when I read this, I didn't know what it was relative to.
Yeah, perhaps it should say calorie content per gram to be specific, but your point may still be that it should be per serving by default, maybe. Is that what you're suggesting, or?
Well, no, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting. I think it might be maybe per serving is the better default, actually. In which case, it could say calorie content per serving here. Calorie content.
I think it's not good because, as we have seen in the example above, the serving size is very substantial.
Okay, fine. All right. Well, then I would say here that the property name could be calorie content and then gray per gram.
Sure. And then for the absolute case, we should probably say calorie content on its own.
I would think so.
Sure.
That is frigging weird, but very amusing.
I mean, this is just the framework going to work.
Well, I know that. But the fact that the amount of iron in a chicken leg is about the same as half the mass of a mosquito is certainly, it's actually much more than I would have expected. But who's to know? I guess not. I guess it's the amount of blood or something. And never mind. I don't even want to think about it. I don't believe in foods. I don't believe in knowing where foods came from unless they're just plants. But that's just me. Being pointed out on the live stream that the amount that the iron, it matters a lot whether it's bioavailable or not. But we don't know that, do we?
No.
It's like the whole spinach story or something, right? Of whether you can actually get the iron out of spinach or not, if I remember correctly.
Wasn't this not just a mismeasurement?
I don't know. I thought it was also part of the I don't know.
I thought it was just a typo.
Really?
A long time ago.
I thought so too.
Remembering, but I thought it was a typo, and that's why people think that it's a great source of iron, and it's not as great as I think people think. Not that it's a terrible one, if I remember correctly.
In spinach, you're saying?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I thought there was like a reaction where you have a problem with because spinach is high in oxalic acid or something like that, that actually makes the iron less available for your body to absorb. So there's certain nutrients that have synergistic qualities where if you consume them together, you actually absorb more of both. And there's others that have the opposite effect. Where if you
that was more what I thought was going on in the iron case.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
Could be both. Yeah, I don't know, honestly.
but so let's ask the following question. The iron that is being stated here, this is simply like somebody put it into a mass spectrometer and saw how many iron atoms there were. Is that true?
I believe that is correct.
So, it is not a completely insane point, but maybe irrelevant. I mean, the question of if it is the case that there are situations with with other aspects of the food that make the iron more or less metabolizable, I mean, there might be a possible footnote.
It's the same for calories.
Is it? Yes, I guess that's right. It's calories from whatever, right? That in principle, but don't they sometimes break that out, calories from fat and things?
Sometimes they do, but not always. Like there are calories if it's too fibrous that we cannot use.
Okay.
Like wood has plenty of calories, but it's of no use for us.
So what do we record when it says calories here? Do we record? I mean, is calories based on burning the food type thing, and therefore is the actual? So wood would have a high value here.
I believe that's the case, but there are definitions that USDA provides, and that's what we've based all of our properties on. There are specific definitions for all of these things on where it comes from and how it's calculated and measured.
All right. So the one thing that this may highlight is, there are places like, I don't know, in our tide computation thing, where we have a generic footnote that basically says, this is based on historic tide data and doesn't take account of local storms and things. The question is, would we want, in a case like this, to put such a footnote in the result? That it doesn't take account of, I don't know what the right term is, whether it's bioavailability or some other term.
But what we are showing is the same what you can see on a nutrition label.
Doesn't mean, yeah, great. It's the same thing, it's like the fact that they don't have footnotes is
It's just it's not exact science. It's like plus minus.
I feel like
something.
you asked for how much iron is in it. You didn't ask how much iron you can digest from it.
Right.
Well, fair enough. But if we're going to be helpful, Michael, telling people, I mean, I don't know. Maybe the question is this. Okay, two things. I'm going to pick between spinach and watermelon or something. I have no idea what the iron content of watermelon is, but or spinach and a piece of a chicken, right? And I really care about how much iron. I really I'm going to high altitude. I really need more iron, or pregnancy or whatever. I don't know. Need more iron for some reason, right?
Red
I'm
meat.
looking at what's that?
Red meat.
Well, yes, that's the generic answer, right? But I mean, so my question is, are we in fact misleading people by saying, we give two iron numbers, and they're basically, we give the same number, let's say for a piece of red meat and a mysterious, South American, guava fruit or something, okay? But in fact, the body absorbs those by a significantly different amount. I mean, is it by 10%? Is it by a factor of 2? Does anybody know?
I think that really depends on the person too.
Yeah,
I think it may be too complicated to. But
is the effect a factor of 2 effect, or is it a 5% effect?
That I have no idea.
It's not a factor of 2. It's something like 10-20%. I think was the variation.
If this really is the case, I have no idea about it. I would guess it strongly depends also on which element we are talking about.
But currently,
we look at the literature a bit and try and find out.
Currently, we are providing the same information as the people has. If they go to a supermarket, they take out the box.
I'm aware.
They look at the label, and it's the same.
Just because other people have got this wrong doesn't mean we have to get it wrong.
Okay.
So one thing I may offer that we can do with the footnote is we have definitions for these that come from USDA. We could put those as the footnotes and say this is how it was calculated.
Well, let's take a look at those. Yeah,
sure. I don't think it's exposed anywhere that you can.
No, I understand that. In a follow-up meeting, we could take a look at that.
Sure.
But let's just get the answer to the question. Is it a 5 or 10% effect, in which case it's all irrelevant because all this stuff is only accurate to that amount, or a factor of 5 effect?
I think on certain nutrients, it can really drastically depend. I know, for instance, like most vitamins and minerals we consume, or especially vitamins we consume that come from natural sources, are much more effectively absorbed by our body, except for, I think, vitamin E, where the synthetic version is actually absorbed at almost twice the rate or something like that. So I think it really can have significant effects.
What the heck's the difference? I mean, these are just molecules, aren't they?
But they're different forms of the molecules. So the molecules these are really, especially vitamins, are big organic molecules. So it might be that one side of that molecule fits in to a certain part, but the other.
But is that because of stereochemistry or what?
But I think they might even. I think when we say like vitamin E, there's actually like 5 different compounds that can technically be considered vitamin E, because to be a vitamin is essentially our body can absorb it and use it in metabolic pathways, not necessarily stating it's one particular molecule.
Didn't know that. Okay.
I think it also depends on the presence of other things, like what do you eat with it.
Right.
Yes. Okay, but so it isn't. I mean, like vitamin A being retinoic acid or something, whatever it's supposed to be. That's not. Or is that? I mean, that's not that complicated a molecule. Did I misremember that completely?
No, I think that's right. But I think that it also depends sometimes, like, we'll actually not consume the vitamin, we'll consume like a precursor, and then our body can break
maybe some of them are different, because I mean, like ascorbic acid for vitamin C is also not that complicated, right?
Right.
Okay, let's take a look here. Oh, wow. Hi. This is a lot of stuff.
But we're recycling most of the pods. So if you are okay with the order and which pods show up there, then
more or less. I mean, more or less. But there's more. This can be tightened up. I mean, this is a wonderful thing, and a huge amount of work has been put into it. So let's not. I I got to see the coming soon.
But just like that's a dessert here. You're not even finished with the main course.
Yeah, I hate these input interpretations. I got to tell you.
Okay, if we will try, make some.
Let's look at the alternatives. Okay, it's just so computeristic. Ingredients by frequency. What the hell does that mean? That they're all oscillating at a certain.
Well, yeah, frequency is probably a bad term. Maybe by count is more. Maybe by I don't even know a better word to use. But
what does
how
it mean?
frequently they show up if you take all of the ingredients of all the foods that match the query, so all white breads in this case, and you flatten out all of the ingredient lists, and then you do tally on it basically.
I would say common ingredients.
Common ingredients, sure.
And then you've said common allergens there, which would probably map from this.
Yes, but I think the common also is referring to the fact that it's in most of the foods that are included. So it's a little technical and tricky.
Oh boy, yeah. Well, then you could say frequently occurring allergens.
Yeah, that's a good name. I like that.
When you're saying 44%,
we
I don't know what that
for
means.
many we don't know, but we didn't find counter examples.
Yeah, so in that top one for wheat-free, 44% of them are wheat-free, and then the remaining ones we don't have any information on.
But we know half of them are not suited to vegetarian because there are non-vegetarian things inside.
Very interesting. Okay. Well, what I would do, first comment is use ... dots or something instead of the actual gray line here, because it will make it clearer that there's something missing there. And presumably you have a situation in which there are yeses, there are nos, and there are don't knows.
Right. There's a green, red, and gray.
Right. So I'm suggesting that gray be a dotted thing or something.
Dashed.
Maybe.
Because it should span, kind of otherwise.
Oh, no, I agree. It's got a span. But I'm just ... or dash, 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 dash. I don't, Yeah. I mean, I think this has got to say blah, 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 unknown. And I also wouldn't, if this is both no's and yeses are definitively there, I wouldn't gray the yes. I mean, in other words, it's like you got to pay attention. If you're a vegetarian, you got to pay attention. There are ones of these that aren't vegetarian.
But like this one's like, if there's a amount of yes, then that's, sorry, the no always is more important for people.
Oh. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Point.
Like,
yeah, I understand.
It's not symmetric.
Well, which one is the no here?
The red.
Even though it appears to the right of the...
We had long discussions about this.
Yeah.
What's that?
We had long discussions about this.
All right. Well, we're going to have to figure out some... Okay.
Yeah, there's a reason why that's still in dev mode. It still has some work to be done to it.
You can mouse over, I think.
These are just to show an example of some of the data we have for ingredient substitutions. We haven't come up with a pod design for them yet, but it's just something you can do in the language right now.
Cool. Oh, boy. Shouldn't we consider a print form for intervals with quantities?
Yes, that would be so nice.
Well, let's do it. Let's get Jeremy involved. Let's try and invent one.
Yep.
By the way, you missed the discussion yesterday about numbers with uncertainty in print forms. I think you'll like what we came up with.
Oh, cool. I will talk to Jose.
The approximate cooking time association. It's like it's a you know, professional society of people. Never mind.
You can also get it as a data set.
I understand. I just think it's a
Yeah, I get it.
It's not okay. This is very cool. What's that?
ACTA.
Yeah, right. The ACTA, otherwise known as okay. Great. Well, there's a lot of terrific stuff here. Okay, let's schedule another meeting. I mean, we've got several uncertainties here. Can we next time have a, yeah, I mean, the agenda should focus on some of these uncertain pieces and inventorying what the different cases are. If we can get this within the next, you know, sometime next week, it'd be good. So we haven't completely, so I at least haven't completely forgotten all of this. It's really exciting. It's really nice. How good is the linguistics? I think you've addressed that a little bit here. I mean, how much of it is programmatic linguistics? How much of it is hand-curated linguistics?
Andrew, do you want to? It's complicated.
Yeah, that's a very tricky question. Certainly, a lot of it has been done programmatically, but there's also a lot of it that's been done by curation as well. I don't think I can give you any hard concrete numbers or more.
There are two big things. One is basically the current path where, as you saw, even if you didn't like it, we take it apart and try to understand everything. And then there are the brand foods that we might want to parse as one whole.
Yep.
Without understanding the detailed meaning of it.
Yeah, because we don't necessarily know. It's the secret formula for whatever.
Right.
Very cool.
The latter one is still partially in work.
Okay. All right, let's pick this up again in a few days. It's really nice. And thanks to folks on the live stream. Thanks to you guys. And see you all soon.